2024 has been a big year for animation so far. Inside Out 2 has become the highest grossing film of the year and the highest grossing animated movie, period. Despicable Me 4, as much as I have criticized it, predictably turned out to be a major box office hit. Even Kung Fu Panda 4, which definitely didn't make as much money as the other two films, still had a pretty good showing in terms of numbers. And there's still major animated movies coming out later this year, with Transformers 1, The Wild Robot coming later this month, and Moana 2 is coming out towards the end of the year. In the movie world at least, this has been quite a big year for animation, and as a big fan of the medium, I'm glad to see the success. But as much as these big companies love seeing their movies do numbers in the box office, behind the scenes, being an animator for these projects can be, well, hell. It's no secret that animation is a hard thing to do in general. It can take so much time to do, and not anyone can just do it. Working in the animation industry has gotten a lot harder with the rise of AI, the streaming wars demanding more frequent releases of content, and general corporate greed squeezing workers dry. Even for the people who were able to create animated projects of their own with a major company, animated shows and movies are more likely than ever to be altered away from the original vision, put into indefinite hiatus, or just outright cancelled by executives if it fails to meet their unreasonable expectations. I mean, even some of them were just outright cancelled without ever being shown. The sad thing about all this is that animators who have jobs working in the industry are actually in a pretty decent position right now compared to those who have been laid off or have been unable to find a job in this sector. These problems are something that I have noticed for years now, and I've highlighted specific examples before on how screwed up the industry can be. After years and years of worsening conditions for animators and workers in the media industry in general, writers, actors, and animators decided they had enough. This resulted in the writers and actors strike that we saw last year. Then for this year, the Animation Guild's contract with major studios expired, thus prompting negotiations for new contracts and the Stand with Animation rally. So without a doubt, animators are struggling hard in the current landscape of corporate greed and exploitation, and don't get me started on the massive wave of sequels and reboots that we've been getting recently. But whenever I bring up any issues with the production of movies and shows from the major media companies like Disney, at least one person brings up one solution to the gridlock animators are facing. I am of course referring to the indie animation scene. Now, I don't want to downplay indie animation as a whole because I acknowledge that this sector of animation has produced such amazing works of art, and it is worth acknowledging that it has gone a long way in terms of being a possible avenue for becoming an animator for some people. But despite that, the truth is that indie animation alone is not enough of an alternative for most animators to realize their vision of creating the art they want to produce. Before I go further, it's good to define what I mean by indie animation. When you boil it down, it's just short for independent animation or any animated project that is produced outside of the mainstream media companies. So any niche animated project you see online, from storytime animations to full-on YouTube shows like Murder Drones, fit in this category. Although, for the sake of this video, I am focusing mainly on indie cartoons like Hell of a Boss, Murder Drones, and The Amazing Digital Circus, which are the projects that I think of when it comes to this term. While I haven't watched Hell of a Boss, I can easily see that it has been a very successful show with its large devoted fan base and has become an avenue for animators to be more free with how they do their work. The same goes for Murder Drones and The Amazing Digital Circus, which are the two indie shows from Glitch Productions that I've watched and enjoyed in recent years. These shows in particular have been a breath of fresh air for me because, in a lot of ways, they are my ideal kind of show that I've been asking for years. These shows are meant for older demographics like teens and young adults like me, but they aren't explicit in their vulgarness and violence compared to other adult shows. Also, despite being produced independently from mainstream outlets, their quality of animation and writing either matches or exceeds them at times. Now, I can go on and on about how much I like these two shows from Glitch, but long story short, I think they are great when all things are considered. But I wouldn't say they are the future of animation like what some fans are calling it. Despite how good the indie animation scene has become, to say that it will become the norm or it will save the industry from creative bankruptcy is just nonsensical. There are multiple reasons why, but ultimately, it all boils down to money. Specifically, the high cost of producing high-quality shows and movies, and the limited ability of indie animators to raise money. With the cost of production, it's no secret that making an animated show or movie costs a ton of money. For big blockbuster films from Disney, Dreamworks, and other mainstream outlets, their budgets can range from $80 million to $200 million, which is utterly insane to wrap your head around. When it comes to animated shows, the average episode can cost at least several $1,000,000, and that's not even including the cost of producing music, the voiceovers, and the marketing. Now, it is possible to make a show with smaller budgets, but even cartoons from Glitch, for example, can probably cost at least $300,000 for one 22-minute episode. Again, this is only the cost of animation, so without a doubt, producing a show is expensive. But so what? How hard can it be to raise that much money? I mean, if you have a huge following, like some of these creators, you should be able to raise enough money to make a show, right? Nope. The sad truth is that crowdfunding projects, on its own at least, is not enough to fund a show, especially if your base of support are people who are not old enough to have a source of income, or just do not have a big enough source of income to start. Even if you are able to raise enough money, it would have most likely taken so much time to collect enough to even start production. This is part of the reason why the releases between episodes of certain indie animated shows take months at a time. Animation takes a long time, with episodes of popular shows taking up to 9 months to make. Thankfully, for some of these shows, major studios are able to make multiple episodes simultaneously, hence why shows like Amphibia were able to have weekly episode releases. But even shows like it still had month-long hiatuses. With indie animated projects with smaller budget and staff, creators are less likely to be able to release multiple episodes at the same time. If they were, odds are they probably would have had longer hiatuses between releases than they currently do. Of course, crowdfunding is not the only way to raise money. Creators can also raise money through selling merchandise, sponsorships, and other kinds of business dealings and partnerships to fund their indie projects. I mean, this is how Glitch goes about funding their animated projects. However, this approach also means giving in to the fact that you will have to turn your creative project into a business plan which can alter your vision for a show or movie significantly, if not suck out the creativity out of you entirely. Ultimately, this is why the idea of indie animation replacing the mainstream animation of the big corporate studios is never going to happen. In order to get an indie animated project off the ground, you have to incorporate tactics and methods that the mainstream corporate studios do to raise enough money. When you do that, then you've essentially created the business at that point, and that means you have to compete with other businesses like your own. I don't mean compete in the sense that you have to make a better work of art. What matters ultimately is whether you generate enough profit to keep the business going, and unfortunately, if your competitors are going to be businesses like Disney, you're gonna have to cut corners that will inhibit creativity within production. In other words, you'd basically be putting artists in these indie projects under the same stress and poor working conditions that people in the major studios are experiencing right now. I mean, this is something we're kind of seeing already with some indie projects. At that point, when you start doing this, especially if you become the mainstream source of animated projects, then your indie animation would just become the thing you swore to destroy. Bear in mind, this is actually the least bad scenario. If you're an indie animator or indie animation company that chooses to remain small, there's a good chance that either your company will fade into obscurity or get absorbed into a larger media company, which is something that actually happened with Pixar back in 2007. Maybe in the best case scenario, you create a small enough business to fund your indie projects, and if you're lucky, you remain that way. Creativity can still remain to some extent, but if you choose this route, then by definition, you will never become the mainstream source of animation. Therefore, you will never replace the big studios that we have right now. I think I'm just repeating myself at this point. My point is that it is very unlikely for indie animators, studios, and their projects to replace the big corporate studios we have now, unless they ditch the very things that made them great to start with. It's the classic example of that overly repeated quote, "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain." As much as people say that, there's a good reason for why we hear this so much because of how often this happens. The fact is that you cannot change the animation industry to make it more creative by saying, "Fine, I'll do it myself." But I will say this, indie animation by itself may not be enough to change the industry for the better, but it is still an essential key to bring change. There's a best example to the world of what happens when a creator is given just enough resources needed to bring their creative vision to life, with little meddling from corporate heads. When that vision resonates with millions of people and becomes a very popular IP, then the big players of the media world will take notice. If you combine the obvious proof of indie animation success and the consistent pressure from unionized workers within the industry, the companies will have to give in to their demands. This is why labor movements like what we're seeing today are key. Workers have so much leverage in how a business creates their products. Businesses as small as your local restaurant to multi-billion-dollar companies cannot operate without workers. And that's a fact that corporations hate. They can try to find ways to automate the process as much as they want, but AI will never be a good replacement for humans in the field of art. Big studios need real, hardworking artists who believe in their vision in order to make something that their audience will actually consume. So while indie animation alone cannot save the industry, indie animation plus a vibrant, strong labor movement will. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts of how the animation industry works. If you have anything else to add to this topic, feel free to write them down in the comments below, and please give this video a like, and subscribe for more content like this. With all that said, thank you all for watching this video. I hope you all have a great day. See you in the next one.